Hello. I've got two roosters in the barn here with me. You may hear them. I can see them. I actually have an audience, a white one and a speckled one. You may hear them making funny noises. Anyway, one last time I want to talk about my experience with those elementary school students last week. I was supposed to teach them about Baroque music. And I said, how the heck do you do that? And I'll show you what I did. But one other thing before I get into that, I had a comment, finally. I don't get very many comments on my videos. But the wife of the man who made the harp that I was holding lives in Hawaii. And she saw this, I guess, or maybe he's the one that saw it, and recognized the harp and said, hey, nice harp. I swapped him that harp for a trombone that I had that I didn't want anymore. I felt like I made a good deal. But anyway, and she added, oh, by the way, ukulele doesn't have a Y at the beginning of it. And I thought, whoa, you mean it's pronounced ukulele? Never heard that. But here she's from Hawaii. They ought to know. Well, I looked in the dictionary and it said nothing about that Y there. So I'm going to continue to say ukulele. When I go to Hawaii, I'll speak, when in Rome, do like the Romans do or whatever. If I find that's the way they say it, I don't think I'm ever going to Hawaii. Anyway, why I went into that is because ukulele weeps. If you go on YouTube, there's over 9 million people have viewed this. A guy is playing a baritone ukulele, and just to make sure you realize that that is a perfectly serious instrument. There's the channel, and you could go find it. All right, now back to Baroque music. What I did with the kids, and thank heaven for YouTube, in general, it's making this class possible, and that day it was available. I wasn't so sure I'd have it available, but it was there. And what I did with those kids is what I've done with my students before. I first showed them this, Air on a G string, and there's the channel. The Dublin String Quartet is the one that I found, although it's famous. And I explained to the kids that I use that in school because although some students may say, "Oh, it's boring. I don't like it," I can usually get them to admit that Baroque music is pretty. If they listen to this, it's very hard for them to not admit that that is pretty music. Now it's very calming, and I worried a little bit about the kids going to sleep if I played it long. They'd already had their recess and had their lunch and stuff. But once again, it had its effect. So I recommend you check it out. I'll maybe talk about this later anyway, when in the chronological order survey, when I get to Baroque music. Then another example of that, which I think has that same effect. I showed them a little bit of Bach's Concerto in D minor for 2 violins. The second movement, it's a largo. Same thing, it is very pretty. And it's got something in it called counterpoint. In at least one class, we sang Row, Row, Row Your Boat in 2 parts as a round, so I could show them that, well, it's a little bit like that. One violin starts one tune, and then before long, the second violin starts that tune, but at a different time, and the 2 go together. I didn't show very much of this. I discovered that one because of a movie called Children of a Lesser God, which is a pretty darn good movie. And I was desperate to know what was that tune that the teacher was listening to, and I finally got it. Then I go, and just in case kids think, oh, well, it's pretty, but it's not exciting, here's the one I really wanted to make sure I had. Gloria in Excelsis Deo from Bach's B minor Mass, and I wanted this specific one. There's the channel. It's being sung by the Thomas Chor in Leipzig, Germany. And why I so much like to show that? Well, 2 reasons. One, I explained to them that in Europe, boys do more singing than they do here in the United States. It's not all that common to have a boys' choir in the United States. There are some, but when boys become men, then they'll sing tenor and bass. But there's not that same appreciation for boys singing. I don't know why that is. My dad always used to wonder about that too, because he was such a fan of good singing and boys' choirs. Well, anyway, I say there's not a woman up there in that church. They're all boys, the sopranos and the altos. So I want them to see that. But the other thing is, well, maybe there's 2 things. The other thing is they are singing with such passion. I tell them, watch those boys sing. You know, they're like you might be at a football game or a basketball game. They are so into it. They're not just standing there doing their duty and singing. No, they are throwing themselves into this, and it is very exciting. It is. I don't play the whole thing. I usually stop when there's a decrescendo at a certain point, but enough so you can see some of those boys singing, and you hear those Baroque trumpets and all that excitement of it. It's in triple time, so it makes you almost feel like dancing. I recommend you check these out. Boy, especially that one. And then this one, the Hallelujah chorus, and I tell the kids, well, I'll tell you about that. But anyway, the one I'd like you to watch, if you can go to find it, I'd say watch no other. It's being conducted by Christopher Hogwood, George Frederick Handel. Of course, he's the guy who composed Messiah and the Hallelujah chorus. It's probably the most famous piece of Baroque music or maybe choral music in the English-speaking world. That's probably true. And it's being sung in Westminster Abbey. I started with those kids and I said, do you remember the royal wedding? Do you remember Kate and William getting married and the horses and the carriages going down the street? And just, some of them did. Quite a few of them did. And I'll say, well, they got married in Westminster Abbey. That's almost 1,000 years old, that church. It's 4 times older than the town that those kids live in. But anyway, I explain about how cathedrals like that are so wonderful to sing in because the walls are stone and the sound bounces all over the place. And that's where they're singing, not a very big choir. And once again, the only women that are there are the soloists. The sopranos are boys, the altos are actually men. It's the soprano section of the boys. And there's one boy on the far right-hand side of the soprano section as he's standing that I really like to point him out to the kids. Watch his mouth, I say. Watch his mouth. At one point he has to sing the word world. And he's got that's hard to say, R-L-D, world. But he puts the D on the end of it so perfectly. You can see that he's a good singer. And I like to tell the kids, I can tell who the good singers are usually in a choir. Even if I can't hear them separately, I just look. And the ones that are opening their mouths, I can tell if they're good singers because you can't really sing with your mouth shut. And then right toward the end, I let them hear the whole of it. Oh, and as it starts, I said, now very quietly, when it begins, if you recognize this, I want you to very quietly raise your hand. And so once it started and the choir came in, I went like this, and almost every kid raised his hand. They knew this piece of Baroque music. And then right toward the end, there's something called a grand pause, where it stops. Everything stops. If they're singing hallelujah, hallelujah, and it stops. And I point out that sometimes if this is badly done and the singer's out there not paying attention, they might all of a sudden blurt out a hallelujah when everything else has stopped. That's pretty embarrassing when that's happened. So I show it to them. And then we got to the end, and one girl, she said, you know, when everything stopped, you said it all stopped, but it didn't stop. I could hear it. And I said, you're absolutely right. It was bouncing all around inside the church. All right, I'll leave that behind. I'm going to come back to Baroque music, of course, in the springtime, by the time we get up there. And now I will turn back to what you would normally expect. But I'm sharing this experience with you of having been invited to an elementary school.